Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being with us today for this panel, Mission Mitigation, Bridging the Path to Decarbonization in the Developing World. Today, we'll have a 50-minute conversation with 35-minute discussion with our panelists and then a 15-minute Q&A session. I'll ask our panelists to keep their answers to about 3 minutes so that we have time to cover these very interesting topics. So for this session, we will explore the conundrum between the urgency of the global green transition and decarbonization for developing countries and the specific challenges that most of them face, and especially struggling with accessing international financing and attract investments to develop. So how do we reconcile those objectives using local resources such as oil and gas versus climate action? And how do we reconcile climate action with the lack of international financing? I'm very pleased to have 4 panelists with us today, with Patricio Barreiro, Director for International Development and International Cooperation at the Center for the Implementation of Public Policies Promoting Equity and Growth in Argentina. Then we have Yufang Zhu, Dean of the School of Public Policy and Management of Tsinghua University in China. Abdeta Bene, Executive Director of the Center for Dialogue, Research and Cooperation in Ethiopia. And Judith Mwaniki, Director of the Development Programs at the Consortium for Economic Research and Development Studies in Kenya. Thank you very much for being here with us today. So let's dive in with Patricio. You work on sustainable development, and as I mentioned earlier, for developing countries to decarbonize, there needs to be international financing and investments. But progress for unlocking this international financing is very slow. There is a lack of consensus on technical reforms to unlock financing. The United States, a major contributor, has just withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, and global North countries are also demanding that emerging powers pay their due despite their own challenges. There seems to be a lack of global leadership and coordination to move the needle, whether it is within the global south or between them and global north countries, despite high expectations vis-a-vis the G20 and the BRICS, for instance. So in your opinion, how should global south countries coordinate, and what form of leadership and by whom can emerge?
Well, first of all, thank you very much all for the presentation. And thank you very much, Orf, for the invitation to participate in the Urban Dialogue for the first time and for inviting Argentina to represent its own voice. I was thinking about what you said, and that slow progress on unlocking international climate finance and that lack of consensus on reform reflect a deeper issue, which is the real vacuum of a global climate leadership. This temporary withdrawal of major players like the United States and perhaps Argentina from the Paris Agreement and the fragmentation we are experimenting on multilateral climate efforts have left all the countries without a clear and coordinated path forward. Meanwhile, this division between the global north and the south continues to widen, not only in terms of emission, but also in access to finance, to technology, and decision-making power. In this context, I think the Global South must not wait for leadership, it must create it. But we may wonder how. First, addressing regional coalitions, which must become engines of coordination. Nowadays, the African Union, the CELAC in Latin America, and the Asian in the Southeast Asia must not be only diplomatic spaces. They should be strategic tools for this purpose. This bloc can align positions, pool resources, negotiate collectively in global forums. And they also can serve as social incubators for South-South cooperation. How can they do this? By sharing technology, policy models, and financing mechanisms tailored for our necessities. We can imagine nowadays how this coordination can work, for example, in the lithium strategy in Latin America or the shared renewable energy grid across East Africa. These are not dreams. These are achievable points with political will and institutional support. The second thing is that we need issue-based leadership. Not every country can lead on everything, but many can lead on something. Kenya is showing the way in renewable energy, and Argentina, my country, is advancing sustainable agriculture and lithium development. And Indonesia is a global reference in forest conservation. So those countries can lead by the example, demonstrating that development and decarbonization are not mutually exclusive. Their leadership can inspire other countries too. Third, we must reimagine multilateralism. Nowadays, institutions like the G20 and the BRICS have potential, but they must evolve from being forums of dialogue to platforms of delivery. They can set measurable goals, ensuring accountability, and include civil society, youth, local governments in the decision-making progress. It also means to push reforms in global financial institutions so that the climate finance is not only more accessible, but also more just. Finally, leadership must be distributed and inclusive. It's not about one country or one voice. It's about building a coalition of the willing, grounded in shared values, and, as they said before in other panels, mutual respect. Leadership in the Global South must be collaborative, not competitive. We must recognize that our strength lies in the unity, and the diversity is an asset, not a barrier. The Global South has the talent, the resources, and the urgency. What we need now is the will to act together and the courage to lead from within.
Thank you very much, Patricio. And I think we will come back to this question of solidarity and coordination in the Global South in a moment. But I would like to turn to Judith, who works on food security in Kenya. And quite often there is this tension between the needs for basic development services such as food security, which is a major challenge on the African continent, and then climate action. So Judith, perhaps could you tell us how do we reconcile sometimes that contradiction with the pressure exerted by richer countries on poorer countries to decarbonize as fast as possible and pursue their green transition, and then challenges such as food security, which is often seen locally as a higher priority. Does it need to be a trade-off between food security and climate action and decarbonization? Or can that be advanced both hand in hand? And can you provide us with perhaps some tangible examples?
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. First, I want to thank the ORF team and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Armenia for organizing yet another edition of the Yerevan Dialogue, and in particular for having this panel and bringing the perspective of Kenya, the Horn of Africa, and the Sub-Saharan Africa at large. I'll begin by centering a reality that millions of people across the African continent live in every day. The food security is not just an abstract concept. It's a lived reality. It is urgent, immediate, and personal. And therefore, for most of the communities in this region, the question is not whether or not to decarbonize. It is how to survive the next failed season. Climate change is not a future threat. It's current. It's what we are living in. It's what we live on our day-to-day. And therefore, it's already reshaping food systems, livelihoods, reducing yields, drying up rivers, and even disrupting livestock movement. For millions of farmers, pastoralists, fisherfolk, the hottest year in record, which is this year, is not just an abstract headline, once again. But this is an impact on day-to-day livelihoods. It's an impact on how communities live and survive. And so, to your question, whether developing countries can prioritize both food security and decarbonization, I respond with a firm yes. We can and we must, because our survival is dependent on that. And like I said, this is deeply personal. But we can only achieve this if we stop treating the two, that is food security and decarbonization, as competing goals or as issues that have to be dealt with as one at the expense of the other. Or like if we achieve one, then we have to drop the ball on the other. We have to recognize their deep interdependence. We have to recognize that the two must go hand in hand. For us to achieve food security, we must think about decarbonization. We must think about strategies. But then even as we think about strategies, this needs to be one, community-led, and solutions driven by local communities, not solutions that have been conceptualized elsewhere and brought to us for implementation, but it is communities leveraging on local indigenous knowledge to offer solutions to one of the most pressing global needs of our time, to offer solutions that will get Africa and the global south at large moving forward. And part of the solutions that local communities have implemented at a simple local and indigenous level include incorporating climate-smart agricultural activities, which are activities such as agroforestry, minimum tillage, wetland restoration, mangrove restoration, as well as regenerative agriculture among farmers. And again, going back to the crops that we've known, that we've traditionally grown, that are drought tolerant, that are resistant to pests, and that are better adapted to our climatic conditions. And with this, then it means because they require less, they take less from the soil. And with this also activities means we are increasing our productivity while reducing on soil erosion. Like for instance, when you talk of practices like agroforestry, which is technically incorporating tree covers within our farming systems, it means we, one, are bringing in additional trees, and these trees could be fruit trees or just normal trees, which means we're increasing forest coverage. We are also making sure that with increased forest coverage also means the soils are better protected from soil erosion. It also means that with such a practice, it's also a diversified income line for farmers. It's also diversified nutrition for farmers. When we think of practices such as crop rotation, such as better livestock management practices, better water management practices, better water management practices, and incorporation of technology in agriculture, such as precision agricultural farming practices, means we are able to again conserve, including our water, limited water resources, and be able to use this well. And so, like I've said, communities must and have to look at both decarbonization and ensuring food security hand in hand, and as two interventions, or rather as two complementing interventions actually. Food security and climate action are not parallel paths. They are mutually reinforcing goals. And with the right policies, the right partnerships, and investment, we can build systems that nourish the people and the planet at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith. And I think what you mentioned is particularly important, as the dismantlement of USAID in the US has, again, put the spotlight on the need to reform international assistance and to give the means to local communities to drive change. Let me go to Zhu Fang. You're a development specialist in China, and obviously China is a major contributor to climate action and climate investment in developing countries. With the withdrawal of the United States from the Paris Agreement, what role do you see China taking in advancing climate action for developing countries? Critical minerals producer countries such as Zimbabwe have called investors to support their green transition, and so that their green transition can benefit local needs as opposed to simply cater to the needs of richer countries. So what is China's approach to these needs, and what cooperation can there be with global north countries such as Europe, which are increasingly trying to diversify their partnerships?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. The topic we discussed today is to exactly at the right moment for many developing countries. We should develop the collaborations among developing countries, and also the combating climate change has become harder than before because the resources are limited, and also multilateralism weakens, and also developed countries throw away their commitments. So before we go further, we must keep in mind that the founding principle of climate cooperation and negotiation forged by the 1992, the Real Earth Summit, that developing countries and the developed countries share common but differentiated responsibilities in addressing climate change. So this principle has been guided climate negotiations, and starting from here, I would like to share some opinions on the climate change and the decarbonization in the world of developing countries. First, moving into the future, we must prepare for mitigation with adaptation, especially for developing countries. Even under the most optimistic mitigation pathway, scientists predict that we are likely to face climate overshot, which means the temperature rise above 1.5 or to 2 degrees Celsius. Many developing countries, especially the least developed countries, are already experiencing economic and social changes brought by climate change. Just our friend from Kenya said, the food security, and also the like a storm and also other disasters. So therefore, we must plan for adaptation strategies as much as decarbonization strategies altogether and simultaneously. Second, we must redefine green development as green inclusive growth. This is also our Chinese experience. In the past, there has been misunderstanding that green development means that only green industry deserve development. However, for developing countries, the question should really be how can we grow and go green simultaneously. Not that because of this is not green, we cannot develop that industry. For us, for developing countries, we should not do so. And the green development must also be backed by solid governance. It is not about piloting only some green projects, but also it is about growing the whole economy by cutting emissions. And also this requires collaborations, governance among ministries, and also reinforcement, coordination between the central and the local governments, and the clear mid and the long-term plans that guide industries. And also, if growth and the decarbonization are planned together like this, climate actions can be catalyst and not a constraint for development for developing countries. And the third, I think I would like to advocate that climate action should be seen as a win-win solution for both developing countries and developed countries. So first, before we talk about the collaborations between developing and developing countries, South-South collaborations, we must emphasize that developed countries and developing countries collaboration climate action is often portrayed as a one-way transfer of resources and technologies from the north and to the south. While that's why some developed countries are reluctant to undertake actions in recent years. However, just like open source of AI can accelerate the development of AI, technology transfers and open standard license on clean energy technologies could accelerate the diffusion and also lower down the costs and feedback into the innovation process to developed countries. That's why I would like to emphasize that before we talk about the South-South cooperation, we should emphasize the transfer from the technology from the developed countries to developing countries should be a win-win solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, I'd like to turn to Adeta, who work on conflict resolution in Ethiopia, and perhaps linking with what Jufeng was saying. Adeta, just earlier you were telling me that Ethiopia has been exploiting gold, and there has also been some new agreements for investments in other critical minerals, with China notably, but also with Japan, among others. We know that, as Jufeng was saying, that those extractive mechanisms, we know that mining has an impact on the environment, on communities, with quite often economic development and economic dividends not necessarily trickling down to communities. And they also drive conflicts. We have notably the example in Central Africa with the DRC, unfortunately. So could you please tell us how can we ensure that governments in critical mineral producer countries and investments do not fall into these traps? How do we make sure that investments actually support the local green transition and the economic development of producer countries and the region, as opposed to simply being extractive in supporting the green transition of richer countries? What can you tell us about these questions?
Thank you, Audi. But before responding to your questions, I would like to join colleagues in thanking the Foreign Ministry of Armenia, the Yerevan Dialogue team, and ORF for inviting me for the second time to attend the Yerevan Dialogue in this beautiful city of Yerevan. This is a critical question and timely one, Audi, especially for countries like Ethiopia who are coming out of sustained conflicts. They want to address some of their challenges. Complex terrain of internal contestation is there. Resource wells, whether you have to use it now or even postpone by prioritizing sectors that are having a huge population. For example, agriculture covers 80% of Ethiopia's population, and focusing on mineral resource exploitation might sway the economy into a resource trap. But overall, I think if the government follows some 5 key strategies, it can address some of the challenges related to resource trap. One is community-centered investment frameworks, whereby prior informed consent from communities is taken care of. At the same time, benefit-sharing mechanisms, grievance redressing systems, and developing opportunities and creating frameworks to address challenges remain the key in this regard. The challenge in Ethiopia is the government owns the entire land, and hence communities might have a weaker bargaining capacity to get what they deserve. The second strategy to avoid that kind of trap is transparent and accountable governance. Of course, Ethiopia conducts every 5 years elections. It's a federal structure with growing institutions capable of addressing some of the challenges. But then Ethiopia must be encouraged to join, for example, extractive industries transparency initiative. There must be a local level capacity building in which most investors are not interested to put money in, even as different countries, either from the east or the west, they are actively engaging in exploitation of resources rather than creating or supporting institutions of transparent and accountable governance. That should change. Of course, the third strategy is environmental and social safeguards should be put in place. An independent environmental assessment, rehabilitation and closure plans, cumulative impact assessments. If one put in place parallel environmentally friendly investments as crucial steps, one can avoid these resource and challenging traps. The other one is linkage to local green industrialization. In Ethiopia, you'll find several industrial zones whereby specific zones could be allocated for linking resource extraction and green industries such as production of panel, etc. In Ethiopia, there is a huge gap between electricity production and those that are getting access to electricity, for example. It's like 50-50. But if we can produce in those sectors panels from these extractive engagements, then one can address the issue of access to electricity, health sectors supported by electricity, etc. The other one is how to be conflict sensitive in those engagements. As I said earlier, one of the biggest challenges for Ethiopia is land belongs to the state, and hence it has the biggest power or authority to offer land to investors for exploration. Unless one creates a critical mechanism of addressing these conflict sensitive situations, it will be a challenge because communities react as communities to defend some of their customarily available mechanisms of livelihoods. Is there a mechanism for example, equitable benefit sharing across groups? That should be created. For Ethiopia, critical minerals are important. It can help Ethiopia address challenges of poverty in the longer term. But the challenge is not merely about attracting investment, but about governing it wisely. So employing those 5 critical strategies would help the government address some of the challenges that these extractive industries would bring into the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdeta. We have a few minutes left for a second round of questions before moving to the Q&A. I'd like to go back to Judith and Patricio, who both mentioned South-South cooperation. As European countries notably are trying to diversify their partnerships, how can Global South countries seeking to advance their decarbonization and green transition build their bargaining power through coordination, through solidarity and cooperation? How can they build that bargaining power so that they can attract financing in investments? Perhaps I'll go to Judith first and then we can go to Patricio.
Thank you. This is a really timely question, especially in view of the shifting geopolitics and priorities in the world and the climatic changes that we're seeing happening around. But we must acknowledge the challenges faced by the Global South are similar. In as much as the Global South has the biggest population, which for us is on one end a challenge, but then also an opportunity for us to rethink ourselves, our systems, and to also look inwards and think about how can we collaborate as countries of the Global South. How do we look at South-to-South collaboration in terms of tech transfer, in terms of knowledge transfer, in terms of borrowing best practices that have worked across the region, and in terms of even coming together to speak in what I'd put it as put up a single voice, to have a common unified voice to articulate for our issues and our agenda, especially on global platforms. And when we look at the challenges we face, have a common thematic alliance towards looking at how to address the challenges that we go through, and also looking at how to, again, leverage on our strengths, leverage on our resources, leverage on our technologies to address the issues that we go through. There's also need for the Global South to develop a common policy position. When we look at like climate issues, unemployment issues, again, also the challenges that we go through as a whole, coming up with a common policy framework that we can use to not just articulate, but to also reinforce our voice across platforms. And on top of that, also using this voice for a common good, using our voice together to make sure that even on global platforms across the world, we are not just seen, but heard. We're not in rooms to just be counted, but we are in rooms to make a change. We are in rooms to articulate our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricio. Please go ahead and perhaps try to keep to 2 minutes so that.
I agree completely with Judith, and I think we have a great opportunity. It's a unique window, but we have to work strategically and solution-driven. The first thing is the coordination, as I said before. For example, in Argentina or in Latin America, the lithium triangle, Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile, we hold the half of the world's lithium resources. So we can work together in pricing, regulation, and environmental standards. The second thing is we need to build a strong cross-regional alliance, like Central Africa, Southeast Asia, as I said before, because we have similar challenges. And by that cooperation, we can work together and share best practices. Third, this leadership must be distributed and pragmatic because, as I said before, this leadership does not need to come from the biggest economies. We have examples in Argentina, in Indonesia, in Kenya. And finally, I think we must redefine our narrative to reinforce the South's voice, as Judith said. The Global South is not just a supplier. We can be innovative, resilient, and propose climate solutions. So I think, adding to what Judith said, that these 4 points will make us to a good point.
Thank you. Going to Abdeta, still talking about the South-South cooperation, notably with Gulf countries, which are investing massively in the green industrialization sectors. thinking about Saudi Arabia, the UAE. They've explored partnerships with Latin America, like Brazil, but also in Africa. Abdetta, what can you tell us about the way you see Gulf countries' role playing in Africa and perhaps specifically in the Horn, and what opportunities, if any, exist to develop new deals that are not simply extractive?
Well, Odi, the Gulf states, particularly the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, have emerged as key actors as part of the global critical minerals and green transition landscape. In the Horn of Africa, of course, they want to use the Horn as a diversification of their economies beyond oil. They want to secure supply chains for minerals essential to renewable energy, battery, and electric vehicles. They want to project power, of course, and influence in strategically vital regions like the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa. At the same time, they see the Horn and the Gulf as one security complex, for example. The two regions for them are in one terrain. Some members of the Horn are members of Gulf structured institutions in which they believe that the Horn is part of the Gulf. They are overall in political, economic, and social realms of the region. The Horn is a strategic location for markets, supply chains, and food security strategies for the Gulf. Of course, these has opportunities and challenges. In terms of opportunities, there is complementarity. Hydrocarbon can be replaced by energy that could be derived from other sources. Capital and the market can be allied. Investment can change lives in the Horn of Africa. Trainable manpower is there. There is a continuous migration of labor from the Horn to the Gulf, for example. So there are a number of opportunities. The challenges, of course, in the Gulf Horn relations is the relationship is very asymmetric. They are powerful, organized, they have resources, no democratic credentials that they can share with the Horn, which makes accountability a little bit challenging. Of course, weakening multilateralism in the Horn makes a joint capacity to bargain on the part of the Horn a little bit difficult. But the Gulf countries remain huge investors in the Horn of Africa. In Kenya, in AI, with Microsoft, a huge investment from the UAE, for example. The UAE invests in Ethiopia in a huge amount. But at the same time, they are also drivers of some of the conflicts in the Horn. One can easily see what is happening in the Sudan. Of course, they have their own vision, they have their own plan compared to the Horn. That is why that asymmetry has to be understood. But in terms of current rate, I think in green industrial hubs, shared value chains, there is a possibility to invest together. In terms of climate finance, there is a huge resource that can come in helping afforestation in the Horn. There could be a technology transfer and research and development partnership together. In terms of logistics and trade facilitation, because they are investing in ports, corridors, infrastructures that demand huge investments, they can help the region, of course, address some of the fundamental economic challenges. Food, energy, water nexus collaboration could be another one. The risk to avoid is the extractive mechanisms could be some sort of a new colonialism that could come. So one has to be very, very careful. Finally, I think there is a need to reframe the relationship from extraction to co-development. If the Horn can move into that direction, I think there is a possibility to benefit from the partnership between the Horn and the Gulf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Zhufeng, picking up on what Abdeta mentioned, moving from simply extractive partnerships to partnerships that actually support the development of producer countries, how do you see China's role supporting developing countries' industrialization, green industrialization evolve, and how to push for this kind of partnerships that support local needs?
So let's talk about before we talk about the South-South cooperation. As I just mentioned, that we should urge the developed countries should give more resources to developing countries in addressing climate change. However, we are disappointed because developed country has give up to support and. Within the collective actions for the climate actions. So, for example, the United States has give up the Paris Agreement, and also they shut down the USAID, which used to support the lot of resources to developing countries, but now they shut down. Therefore, we must enhance the Global South cooperation for climate change. So this is not only unlocks new opportunities for ourselves, but also for reduce dependency on capitals and technologies from developed countries. As you know, China is the biggest developing country in the world. And China now holds some low carbon expertise and have learned through their trial and error how to grow our economy while lowering carbon intensity. So China makes the world's most affordable solar panel technologies, and also China has financial projects like microgrid and small hydropower, and also climate smart farming across Asia, Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. South-South cooperation has huge potential, but we haven't used it fully yet. So we can play to each other strengths and find the low carbon solution that fit our own needs. So I believe that within what I just said, the adaptation, inclusive growth, and also collaboration among developing countries, we can address and we can transform climate change into the greatest collective actions, opportunities for our area. So thank you.
Thank you. I see we have only 6 minutes left. If there is a question, perhaps we can take one question. Okay, I see the lady over there. I'll ask our panelists to keep their answer to 1 minute, and you have the clock here.
Okay, thank you for your interesting presentation and insightful feedback. I have a concern I would like to share with you, and also like to get your feedback about this concern or issue. In my opinion, I think this projection of decarbonization with the heavy reliance on technological innovation as a silver bullet for climate crisis that will save our planet Earth is further emphasizing climate change as a mere technical problem that can be solved by using technological innovation, and overlooks the other factors, social, culture, and political factors that shape not only our lifestyle, but also our economies and our relation to nature. So how do you think about this increasing reliance on Technofixes as a silver bullet for climate change, overlooking other culture and social and economic factors that shape our lifestyle and our economies? In my opinion, actually these Technofixes, first of all, are some of them are unproven and also expensive. Secondly, in order to manufacture or develop such a kind of technofixes, we need to extract green minerals, and this further perpetuates the socio-economic injustices and like the extractivism model of economy. In addition to this, slow the political will in order to shift the current political and economic system that mainly focus on economic profit and economic growth and further extends the span of fossil fuel companies and industries. So I would like to get like a pre-feedback from you about this, please. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this very thoughtful question. Let's go through our panelists. Patricio first, and then, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I think in Latin America, and especially in Argentina, we have a great opportunity, but we have all those problems that you related. So I think the impact of technology, and as Judith said, the transference of knowledge is quite relevant nowadays, and the political commitment and will to change those things is very important. But as my colleague said, I think we must work together. All the Global South work together, and those pending issues that you mentioned, work on possible solutions and try to fit them in every country. Latin America has one particularity, China another, Africa another, but we can work together to achieve that.
Thank you for your comments and questions. I think first, technology is very important, but not the only solution for climate change. The governance and economic development models are also important. To address climate change is not a burden for developing countries that push us to change our lifestyles and development models for economies. For example, now, in China, from the beginning, we also thought that the climate change issue is like some Western narrative to constrain developing countries' development. But climate change and the technological development is also an opportunity for developing countries. For example, China, from the beginning, we have a lot of emissions, but now China becomes the biggest green technology producers. For example, the solar panels and also the electric vehicles. Currently, we are the most important producers because of our policies, because of our industry policies to foster the young industries. That could be our Chinese experience, what I can share to you. Thank you.
I think in some countries, we have to understand that technological advancement addresses some of the basic problems that we have in terms of poverty, access to health, other sectors. So technological advancement is not only the complex realities that we see in cities. In the countryside where access to technology is not possible, I think through new technologies, adapting new technologies, we can address some of the fundamental basic needs of humanity in those areas.
My comment is going to be really brief. Any solution that ignores the social aspect is bound to fail. It will only bring resistance and hardship and offer no solution to local communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judith, for these last words, which I think really capture the challenges of this topic. I would like to thank our panelists for this very good discussion, our audience, and obviously ORF and the government of Armenia for putting this event together and for allowing us to dive into this topic. Thank you very much, everyone.